You've heard of the Rockefellers. You've heard of the Rothschilds. But the richest and most powerful dynasty in Europe? You've probably never heard their name. For over a century and a half, one Swedish family has quietly controlled industries worth hundreds of billions. From Ericsson to AstraZeneca, from the banks that financed wars to the companies that power the devices in your hand. Their influence is everywhere. Yet you'll never see their faces on the news, you'll never find them on a Forbes list, and you'll never catch them flaunting luxury yachts or private jets. Because for 6 generations, the Wallenberg family has perfected one art better than anyone else: the art of ruling the world without ever being seen. Hit subscribe, because what you're about to hear isn't just history, it's how real power hides in plain sight. This is how a quiet banking family turned secrecy into power, invisibility into empire, and silence into control. This is the untold story of Europe's invisible dynasty, the Wallenbergs. In the mid-1800s, Sweden was poor, struggling, and full of potential, but completely starved of capital. Industry was stagnant, trade was slow, and even the government lacked the means to grow. Then came a young naval officer named André Oscar Wallenberg, who had just returned from the United States full of ideas that could transform his country. He had seen how modern banking fueled progress abroad, and he knew that Sweden needed the same spark. So in 1856, he founded Stockholms and Skilda Bank, the first private bank in Swedish history, a move that would quietly change everything. Before this, loans were controlled by the central bank, slow, rigid, and out of reach for most people. André changed that. He believed that money should move through the hands of ordinary citizens and be used to fund new industries and ideas. Inspired by a model from Scotland, he created a system where people's small savings could be pooled together to build factories, businesses, and innovation. For the first time in Swedish history, money began to circulate, and with it came opportunity. Entrepreneurs borrowed, citizens invested, and an entire nation began to rise. The bank quickly became the heart of Sweden's economic rebirth, fueling trade, construction, and invention. It wasn't just a bank, it was a symbol of trust. And that trust turned into power, and that power turned into something far greater: a legacy. The Wallenberg name became the quiet force behind Sweden's transformation. While others chased fame and titles, André built something far more enduring: an invisible engine that turned capital into growth and growth into dominance. He didn't just create wealth, he created a blueprint for influence that would last generations. The foundation of the Wallenberg Empire wasn't gold or land, it was belief. The belief that money itself could be shaped into power, and André had just built the machine to do it. The dynasty had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. By the early 1900s, the Wallenberg family had already transformed a small private bank into the financial heart of Sweden. André's son, Knut Agathon Wallenberg, took that legacy and pushed it further, turning ambition into architecture for a modern empire. He understood that control didn't come from owning everything outright, but from influencing the systems that moved everything. Under Knut's leadership, Stockholms and Skilda Bank expanded beyond Sweden's borders, connecting the country to major European markets and securing Sweden's position in global trade. When new laws restricted banks from holding too many industrial shares, Knut didn't see a problem. He saw an opportunity. In 1916, he created Investor AB, a holding company that became the family's secret weapon, allowing them to control entire industries without technically owning them. Through Investor AB, the Wallenbergs quietly gained influence over some of the biggest companies in the world, from Atlas Copco to Ericsson to Saab and ABB Industries that powered the modern age. But Knut wasn't interested in fame or attention. He believed that true power thrived in silence. Instead of flaunting his wealth, he invested it back into Sweden, funding railways, universities, and hospitals, shaping the country's future while keeping his name in the shadows. In 1917, he and his wife Alice founded the Knut and Alice Wallenberg Foundation, dedicated to advancing science and technology. But behind that act of generosity lay a brilliant strategy. The foundation ensured that the family's assets stayed intact, untaxed, and permanently under their control. By the 1920s, the Wallenbergs had mastered a paradox. They were everywhere and nowhere at the same time, building an empire so vast it touched every corner of Swedish life, yet so discreet that most people never realized who truly ran the country.
As Europe marched toward war, the Wallenberg family found themselves in the middle of a global storm, where neutrality became both a shield and a weapon. Sweden stayed officially neutral, but the Wallenbergs played both sides, mastering a dangerous balance between morality and survival. Jacob Wallenberg, the sharp banker and diplomat, took control of Stockholms and Skilda Bank, while his brother Marcus worked in parallel, running the industrial empire that powered Sweden's economy. Together, they became the invisible negotiators of Europe, cutting deals with both the Allies and Nazi Germany. Jacob managed Sweden's trade with Berlin, ensuring the country's survival, while Marcus quietly helped to allies through back channels. Their bank, SEB, was accused of laundering assets and gold taken from occupied territories, yet the same family was also secretly helping the German resistance plot to overthrow Hitler. It was a moral maze, and the Wallenbergs walked it perfectly. They were too valuable to condemn, and too powerful to ignore. As the war dragged on, Jacob became Sweden's main link between the Nazi regime and Western powers, while his nephew, Raoul Wallenberg, entered the story as a symbol of courage. Sent to Budapest in 1944, Raoul used his diplomatic cover to save thousands of Hungarian Jews from deportation, forging documents, negotiating with Nazi officials, and standing face-to-face with death to protect the innocent. He turned the Wallenberg name into a beacon of humanity, even as the family's reputation grew darker back home. When the Soviets invaded Hungary, they arrested Raoul, accusing him of being a spy, and he vanished into the gulags, never to return. The family never recovered his body, and his disappearance remains one of history's unsolved mysteries. By 1945, the war had exposed both sides of the Wallenberg legacy, the savior and the survivor, the heroes and the profiteers. Yet while other empires collapsed under the weight of scandal, the Wallenbergs emerged stronger than ever, rebuilding their network in silence, ready to shape the post-war world that would follow. After the war ended, the Wallenberg family faced their biggest test yet, rebuilding both their reputation and their empire in a world that was completely transformed. The revelations about their wartime dealings with Nazi Germany had damaged their image, but the Wallenbergs knew how to turn shame into strategy. While others were being tried or bankrupted, they moved quietly, rebuilding influence piece by piece. Jacob Wallenberg stepped down, and his brother Marcus took control, guiding the family through the turbulent post-war years with cold precision. He rebuilt trust with Western powers, strengthened Swedish industrial exports, and turned neutrality into a national advantage. Sweden became the middleman of the Cold War, selling to both East and West while pretending to choose neither. Behind the scenes, the Wallenbergs financed it all, using their control over Investor AB and SEB to fund everything from aviation and engineering to pharmaceuticals and telecommunications. When Stalin's Soviet Union demanded loans for reconstruction, Marcus saw an opportunity instead of a threat, offering credit while keeping Swedish interests protected. At the same time, his nephew Peter Wallenberg began to rise through the ranks, learning the family's most important rule: never be seen, never be predictable. The tragedy of Raoul still haunted them, but the business came first, and by the 1950s, the Wallenbergs were once again untouchable. Marcus became known as the man who could talk to anyone in any language, capitalist, communist, or king. By the 1960s, his network stretched across Europe and the United States, linking Swedish companies to global markets. And when governments fell and currencies collapsed, the Wallenbergs stayed steady, because their true power wasn't in factories or banks, but in control itself. They had mastered the invisible game, the art of surviving every crisis by staying essential yet unseen. By the time Marcus passed the baton to his sons, the Wallenberg Empire had become more than a dynasty. It was a system embedded in the very structure of Sweden's economy and almost impossible to challenge. By the 1970s, the Wallenberg dynasty looked unshakable. Their influence reached across banks, factories, and boardrooms from Stockholm to New York. But behind the polished image, cracks were forming. Marcus Wallenberg's health was failing, and the question of succession loomed over the empire. His two sons, Mark and Peter, were raised for leadership, but only one was meant to inherit the crown. Mark was the golden child, educated, trained, and prepared to take over everything. Every step of his life was scripted to carry the family legacy forward, yet the pressure was relentless, the expectations crushing. In 1971, tragedy struck. Mark Wallenberg took his own life at just 47. The news hit Sweden like a thunderclap, and for the first time, the Wallenbergs' aura of perfection shattered. The family was shaken, but the empire could not pause. Peter Wallenberg, the quiet younger brother who had spent years working abroad in Africa, far from the spotlight, suddenly found himself at the center of a machine he was never meant to lead. Many doubted him, calling him too soft, too independent, too distant from the family's core. But Peter understood something his father and brother had forgotten. The world was changing. He rebuilt the empire for a new age, streamlining operations, merging banks, and reasserting control over industrial giants like Atlas Copco, Stora Enso, and Saab. He launched Patricia Industries, an investment arm that allowed the family to expand globally without losing its anonymity. Through the 1980s, Peter proved every critic wrong. turning investor AB into one of the most powerful holding companies in Europe. He avoided politics, avoided fame, and rebuilt the family image as disciplined, silent, and essential. By the end of the decade, the Wallenbergs had not only survived tragedy, but transformed it into strength, once again proving that no crisis could destroy them, because their true power wasn't built on personality or publicity. It was built on structure, control, and silence. By the 1990s, the Wallenberg dynasty had evolved from a family into an institution. Peter Wallenberg stood at the helm, determined to modernize everything his ancestors built. He understood that the world was changing fast, and that power now flowed through technology, finance, and globalization. So he transformed investor AB into a financial powerhouse with stakes in Ericsson, AstraZeneca, Electrolux, Saab, and countless others. While other family dynasties faded under public pressure and internal conflict, the Wallenbergs tightened their grip through structure. They didn't own companies directly. Their foundations did. Sophisticated networks that allowed them to control without exposure, influence without attention. Their motto remained the same: to be, not to seem.
As Peter aged, leadership passed seamlessly to the next generation. Jacob, Marcus, and Peter Jr., each trained to lead without being seen. Together, they redefined the family empire for the 21st century. While tech moguls chased fame and billionaires flaunted power, the Wallenbergs stayed invisible, quietly shaping industries that define modern life: 5G networks, pharmaceuticals, defense systems, energy innovation. Their foundations now hold billions in assets and fund research, universities, and technology that strengthen Sweden's global position. Yet behind every act of philanthropy lies strategy. Every donation doubles as influence, every partnership as protection. Today, the Wallenberg family controls roughly 40% of Sweden's entire stock market value, an empire worth over 250 billion euros, all without a single member appearing on a rich list. Politicians, CEOs, and even monarchs know that in Sweden, nothing truly moves without their quiet approval. They don't seek headlines because real power doesn't shout, it whispers. And after 6 generations, the Wallenbergs have mastered that whisper so perfectly that most people don't even realize they're still in control. After 6 generations, the Wallenberg name has become more than a family. It's a system, a quiet machine that keeps Sweden's economy running from the shadows. They built their empire on discipline, secrecy, and timing. When other dynasties fell to greed, ego, or exposure, the Wallenbergs perfected the opposite: invisibility. Their wealth isn't loud, it's structural. It hides inside the foundations that own the companies that shape the modern world. Their fingerprints are on every sector: medicine, defense, telecommunications, finance. Yet their faces are nowhere to be found. That's the paradox of the Wallenbergs. They appear philanthropic, patriotic, and humble, but their humility is strategy. Every act of generosity strengthens their control. Every whisper of anonymity deepens their power. What began in 1856 with one ambitious banker has turned into one of the longest-lasting financial dynasties on Earth. They survived wars, scandals, and tragedies without ever losing focus, because they understood one truth better than anyone: empires built in silence last longer than empires built on fame. Today, their motto still defines them: to be, not to seem. They don't need recognition, applause, or approval. Their influence lives in the systems they built, in the companies they control, and in the very fabric of Sweden's economy. While the world chases visibility, the Wallenbergs remain hidden. And that's why they're still in power. Because in a world obsessed with attention, the greatest power is being unseen. If you enjoy stories that reveal the power hiding behind money, hit subscribe, because the next empire that falls, you'll want to know why before it happens.